Well, good afternoon, good evening, hello, and good evening, everyone. My name is Bill Miller, and on behalf of the Conejo Open Space Foundation, I want to welcome you to tonight's presentation, our first webinar of the 2024 speaker series titled Helping Hummingbirds, Let's Make the Future Brighter with Dr. Julie Morley. We are so thrilled that you are all joining us tonight for this exciting and important presentation. I'm sure many of you are familiar with our work, but some of you may be new to our organization. As an all-volunteer nonprofit group, the Conejo Open Space Foundation focuses on educating our local community, the Conejo Valley, about our outdoor spaces. We also focus on raising funds to support programs and initiatives related to keeping those areas protected and accessible. Each year, we host this speaker series to help bring interesting and informative information to all of you on topics related to our beautiful Conejo Valley. As an example of one of the many ways that we make a difference, I do want to share with you the exciting news that we just awarded this year's COSF Environmental Studies Scholarship Awards to local area students last month. We provide $1,000 annual scholarships to local students pursuing an environmental degree in college or university with the potential to last throughout each of their 4 years in college. We had a record number of applicants this year, and we are so thrilled to be able to support the next generation of open space users in the Conejo Valley. Look for more information to come soon on those whose talented awardees will be. As the Foundation's president, I'd like to take this opportunity to also especially thank the many donors for joining us tonight. Whether you contributed because of this event or are an annual donor, your contributions are making a major impact in the work we do. We thank you for making a difference in your community. So please continue to help the Conejo Valley Open Space in your philanthropic plans and reach out to us anytime. It's almost time to move on to our wonderful program tonight. But before we do, I have a few housekeeping items to share. First, note that all attendees are muted for the duration of the presentation. The presentation will be roughly 45 minutes with an opportunity for you to ask questions afterwards. We welcome your questions submitted at any time during the presentation via the Q&A tool at the bottom of your screen. The chat function has been disabled for this event. My fellow board members, Steve Johnson and Ann Russell, are with us tonight and will be moderating the Q&A for us this evening. We will also be recording the event, so you can rewatch or share with your friends. It takes us about a week to get that up on our website, but we will let you know when that happens for sure. As mentioned, Dr. Julie Morley is our presenter tonight, so a little information about her. Julie Morley, PhD, is a wildlife photographer, author, and founder of Multi-Species Media. Julie has served as an environmental educator at RCDSMM and worked with the LANLT advocating for more green space in urban settings. Her doctoral work focused on avian-human relations. Currently, she brings her postdoc work into her nonprofit to raise awareness about the importance and significance of the hummingbird-human relationship. Her mission is to help hummingbirds survive and continue to flourish in a changing world. So, without much more to say, Julie, please take it away.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you inviting me to be here tonight. Thank you so much to the Conejo Open Space Foundation. Open space is very important to me as well. Being a hummingbird lover, I'm going to now share my screen. So one of the reasons why I decided to title this Helping Hummingbirds, Let's Make the Future Bright is because when I think of a future without hummingbirds, I think of a much less bright future. Hummingbirds have been bringing their flashes of bright color to this part of the world anyway for a very, very long time. But fun fact, the original hummingbird fossil was found somewhere in Germany. So they traveled a long way, a very long time ago, to begin to adapt and proliferate in South America. And so since they've been with us so long, I really am fearing for their future because of population loss at this point. So I'm hoping that we can all do our part to help keep our present and make our future bright. First, I'm going to share a little bit about my personal experience with hummingbirds. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about why they're important to me. I'm going to move on then to why I'm hoping they'll be more important to you by the end of this talk, if not already. And then I'm going to share with you some ways that we can all help hummingbirds to survive in a time of great change and hopefully to thrive and flourish. So I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about my personal hummingbird story, which began with my mother. And it's funny because I do hear this a lot. I hear about many people who have connected to hummingbirds through their parents. My connection was that I grew up in Southern California. So like many of you, I've had the privilege of being around hummingbirds my entire life. And back in the day, we used to have these old-fashioned feeders, and we used food coloring, bright red food coloring, which they are attracted to, but we now know is not good for their little systems. They're pretty resilient birds, but they do have fragile digestive systems and excretory systems. So they cannot tolerate food coloring as we thought that they could. But I mean, we all used to go to school having eaten a bunch of very colorful breakfast cereal. And studies have shown that we probably weren't paying as much attention as we could have been. Long story short, we don't use food coloring anymore. It's not good for them. But when I was a child, I remember just, these beautiful, brilliant red hummingbird feeders swinging everywhere, hummingbirds flashing about. And the thing for me that was very important about that is that it always brought me to this sense of magic and wonder about the world. And I think especially now, that's really important for us to connect to. I also feel that a lot of people report having a connection to lost loved ones through this, through seeing hummingbirds. For some reason, I've heard many people say, oh, I saw a hummingbird. It reminded me of my mother or my grandmother. So I think that they have a magical and spiritual presence for many people. This is not the scientific part of this talk. I'm going to be getting to that. This is more the personal part of this talk. So the picture you're seeing is of a little Allen's hummingbird that I called Rufus. Rufus was the beginning of my hummingbird journey. So this little guy right here, about 3.5 inches long, had an immense presence in my life for many years. I called him Rufus because I met him when he was a tiny little red ball of fluff, and he was a baby. I met him way before he had reached sexual maturity and got this lovely gorget. And I will speak about the various words, the glossary associated with hummingbirds in a moment. But Rufus, I met him when I was doing my graduate work, and he would sit outside my office office window every morning. And he gave me a real sense of joy at a time when I was having some challenges in my life. And I formed a bond with him. I put out a feeder, and we shared a lot of wonderful moments in my backyard at the time. And he hung around. Hummingbirds do hang around if you entice them. And I wanted to get closer to him. I wanted to see all the intricacies of Rufus. So I got an old camera, a refurbished camera, a Canon with a lens, and I started taking pictures of hummingbirds and wildlife. Before that, I had been a photographer in college. I had studied photography, but it was candid photography of humans. But this really gave me a window into hummingbird worlds because I could see hummingbirds up close. But this is the last known photograph of Rufus, the hummingbird, that started it all for me, because when he reached sexual maturity, he decided no paparazzi, that he really wanted to focus more on looking for females and chasing away other males. So that's what he did after that. So I shared a little bit about why hummingbirds are significant personally to me. And now I want to share a little bit about why I hope that they will become more significant to you, and also why I've found that they are significant to many people who come into contact with them. They are essential pollinators, vital to their ecosystems. No doubt about this. They can visit up to 2,000 flowers a day, and they're essential to us because we depend on pollinators for our very existence. They bring joy. I don't know anybody, I haven't met one person yet who doesn't like hummingbirds. Or if they don't, it's because they're afraid of their buzzing sound. They don't understand them. But once they know they're not going to harm them, they see how wonderful that they are. I believe that hummingbirds remind people of their connection with nature instantly and give people a sense of wonder. And I believe that we desperately need this connection, especially now when things are just so fast-paced, hyper-complex, disconnected. And when you tune into a hummingbird, it can give you this instant way of being in the zone and connecting with this sense of nature. And again, they often remind people of lost loved ones. And I want to see if anyone here can relate. I wonder how many people do. Probably a few. And if you do, I'd love to hear about it. Hummingbirds, for me, give me a sense of astonishment. And for me, the word astonish goes beyond just wonder or being surprised or impressed. It's a form of wonder that is more expansive. And I don't know if anybody here knows the poet Mary Oliver. I would guess a few people do. She was a great naturalist poet, and she's one of my favorites. And she once said in a poem called Sometimes, in her instructions for living a life, pay attention, be astonished, tell about it. And that's what I do in my life as in my postdoc work. That's why I'm here today sharing with all of you, because I'm astonished by many creatures in the natural world. I didn't do my doctoral work on hummingbirds, but because hummingbirds have such a special place in my heart, I've devoted the rest of my life to them. So this is a photo of a little female Allens named Lala. And I met her just a little while after I met Rufus. She lived a few territories away. So hummingbirds have territories, and it's usually a male that will have a territory of maybe 1/4 of an acre. And so I always judge city blocks by the male hummingbirds' perches. This guy has that one, this guy has that one. And so Rufus had one territory, and then down a few blocks was Lala. And Lala was in the territory of a male Allens named Balthazar. And I named him that because he was very charismatic and probably had offspring with just about every female in the neighborhood. Lala was one of them. If you'll notice, Lala's bill is slightly, has a slight deformity, and she would dribble nectar. And in a moment, I'm going to tell you about how fast their metabolisms are. They need to gather a lot of nectar, and every drop wasted is very detrimental for them. But for me, Lala was very inspirational because despite having this deformity to her bill and a disability, really, she was able to raise several broods during the time that I knew her and was able to have offspring. And, you know, I'm going to share with you right now, males have a lot of work to do defending their territory and chasing around other males and chasing around females to mate with. Females have this incredibly difficult job of raising broods. And females create these beautiful, intricate nests. They incubate 2 eggs for about 2 weeks, and the babies grow feathers and fledge in a few weeks. And it's a very, very challenging job. They don't get a lot of time off the nest. They don't get to gather as much nectar or eat as much nourishment. It's all going to their offspring. So they have a very challenging job. So this is why for me, Lala was extremely inspirational, because she was able to go beyond her limitations and raise some broods, which is pretty impressive. Hummingbirds are like little superheroes of the bird world. And I say this because they have many adaptations and capabilities that we can barely fathom. We can barely even imagine it. Scientists are only beginning to understand these things. There have been many studies done on hummingbirds in the last maybe 5 years that have revealed so much. One of the coolest that I think is incredible is that they are the only bird that can hover not only forward, but also backwards due to their unique anatomical structure. So I've put a little image of this on the screen here. And this all has to do with the downstroke and upstroke, which has to do with force and lift. That is a completely separate talk, which I'm happy to give it another time. But they are able to hover. And if you've ever seen a hummingbird hovering, then you will know that it is a breathtaking sight. They will pop up and just hover right in front of you, and sometimes just look right into your eyes, or in my case, into my lens, probably looking at themselves, thinking they are quite dazzling in the reflection. Hummingbirds have quite complex brains. And, you know, their cognition is a lot more complex than was ever previously thought. Scientists long ago considered hummingbirds on par with insects. So they didn't understand the complexity of their cognition. But for a while now, studies have been revealing that bird brain is no longer a negative comment. Birds actually have very complex brains that are in some ways convergently evolved with human brains. So with mammalian brains anyway. So the difference is a lot is wrapped up into a tiny space. So hummingbird brains are about the size of a grain of rice, which is a good thing because they have to be very light in order to fly the way that they do. They actually have hollow bones, and they are extremely light. The largest hummingbird weighs maybe about, I would say about 0.6 ounces, and the smallest maybe less than 0.1 ounces. So they're very, very light. And So the hummingbirds around here maybe weigh around 3 cotton balls. So a grain of rice is sizable within that range of weight. They have complex adaptations for color, sound, and magnetoreception. So they can see beyond our color range into UV. They can hear some sounds outside of our range, but they can mostly make sounds outside of our range of hearing. And magnetoreception is what a lot of birds use in order to migrate. It means that they can perceive of the magnetosphere, and that is how they are able to have these amazing GPS systems. And if you look at the hummingbird brain anatomy, you'll see that the region of the hippocampus is greatly enlarged. Hummingbirds have incredible spatial memory. They are like Google Earth. So their spatial memory is a lot like a GPS system. This gives them the ability to remember every flower they have visited along their migration routes. So this is really why this is all that ties this talk about hummingbirds into a talk for the Conejo Open Space Foundation. It's about open space. It's about wildlife corridors when it comes to helping hummingbirds. That is the greatest thing that we could do, because the #1 threat is habitat loss. Imagine you're a hummingbird. You've remembered every flower that you visited along your previous migration routes. You have only so much energy you can spare, because you have a high metabolic rate, which I'll discuss in a moment, but also they don't always stop to gather as much as they would. And sometimes they fly long distances and they burn a lot. So let's say you visit a place you remembered had a patch of flowers and they're no longer there. You've just expended a lot of energy. A lot of hummingbirds don't make it because they've expended so much energy along their migration routes, only to discover that their sources of nourishment are no longer there. This is a big problem. They also have what is called episodic memory in humans. It is episodic like memory in hummingbirds, because humans will remember the what, when, where, why, who of a situation. But the hummingbirds may remember what, where, and who, but they may not remember why. They could, but we don't know that yet. They don't know how much of the why of things they know. They are very curious, and I think there's a lot going on in their tiny rice grain brains, because I've spent a lot of time looking into their eyes very closely. But needless to say, hummingbirds have adapted incredible memories in order to survive. Hummingbirds have another superpower, and that is that they are tetrachromats. They have 4 cones instead of 3. Humans have 3 cones. So some humans are supposed to have 4 cones. There are supposed to be tetrachromats in existence. This is very controversial whether people are or they aren't, but it has been suggested that some great artists may be tetrachromats, like maybe Vincent van Gogh or Gough, if you're a purist. But tetrachromats exist in the hummingbird world. This is a great adaptation for them. And a lot of pollinators have an adaptation to perceive into the UV range and to perceive non-spectral colors that we can't really imagine. Bees, even though they are trichromats like we are, they have developed color adaptations to be able to see non-spectral colors and into the UV range. And this is because, well, when you're able to, through maybe virtual reality, visualize what the world looks like to them, you can see that flowers have these landing pads that tell them exactly what flower has pollen, what flower is filled with nectar. It's pretty incredible, actually. Hummingbirds are sensitive to UV in blue, green, and red wavelengths, but red is the favorite of all time. Planting red flowers is always going to work wonders. And I always like to think of hummingbird worlds as maybe like the world of Willy Wonka's garden, because they are filled with sweets, sweet things to eat. And also they are very brilliant through their eyes. It would be like if you see the world under black light in some way, everything is very brilliant for them. But this Willy Wonka's garden is also very full of challenges. They are like little nectar farmers. Hummingbirds, as I said, can visit up to 2,000 flowers per day, but they can also remember which ones they've already visited, which is a very interesting adaptation. So they know whether they have visited flowers before, and they also know when they're going to be full again. This also coordinates with their ability to hover. Hovering is a unique adaptation that allows them to forage much more succinctly, because they can stop and look around and figure out which patches are ready to pollinate or ready for them to gather nectar. They are little nectar farmers who depend on their territory for survival, and we depend upon them to pollinate our plants and flowers. By the way, I just want to let you know that that photograph is of a Costa's male, and I'm going to talk about him in a second, but you can see that he's got these sort of almost like a handlebar mustache. He's got like a handlebar gorget, and that's what the throat sequins are called. So here's this mini glossary that I'm going to give you for hummingbirds. So these are like some pretty important words to know in terms of talking about hummingbirds. And so the gorget is that brilliant throat patch that you see. This is a photograph of a Allen's male hummingbird, and you see a lot of Allens around here. They are about 3.5 inches of big personality. And that beautiful patch of sequin-like feathers is the gorget. The hummingbird males possess these brightly colored throat patches, and they can extend over the head in certain species, which I'll talk about in a moment. But males will flare their gorget to assert dominance, but also to impress the females. They are nectivorous, or nectivorous, depending on how you want to pronounce that. Hummingbirds are nectar gathering species of bird. They gather nectar many, many times per day, and they pollinate a variety of flowers. They have to gather nectar every 10 to 15 minutes to survive. But nectar only makes up about 20% of their diet. So, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment, but it's only a smaller part of their diet, but they need it to survive. They need that sugar. And they are pollinivorous, which means that they consume a certain amount of pollen. But they don't depend on it. They snack on it while they're going from flower to flower. They snack on a little pollen, but it's actually kind of a double-edged sword for them, or bill, if you will, because as they're gathering nectar and snacking on pollen mites actually climb up their bill and into their feathers. They hitch a ride from flower to flower, and pollen mites are like the equivalent of having lice. I mean, that's the bane of their existence. So if you see them itching themselves, it's because they're trying to get rid of those mites, and the mites are just terrible for them. And I'll talk about that more in a minute. But a torpor is a really important word. It's a state of slowed bodily functions for conservation of energy and heat, which they desperately need. They lower their body temperature and slow their heart rates to use fewer calories. They enter torpor every night instead of what we know of as sleep. If they were to try to just sleep, they would die. Because they have such high metabolisms that they need to gather nectar every 10 to 15 minutes throughout the day in order to survive. So at night, they go into this torpor, which is a mini hibernation. I wanted to also share a little bit about their taxonomy. And before I do that, though, I want to share that this little sweet female Allen's hummingbird, she was one of my favorite subjects. She lived down the street from Rufus. She had her own little corner of the world. Some mature females are actually quite fierce at defending their territories, and she was one of those. She was definitely a queen. So I used to call her Queen of the Leonidas. She is pictured on Leonidas right here. And she was one of my favorite subjects to photograph for a long time. Anyway, if you're familiar with taxonomy, I won't go deeply into it. You can see it here on Amalia cordata, vertebrata, aves. They are in the order Apodiformes. And that means unfooted bird. So a very long time ago, scientists, before they had, a lot of the research equipment we had, they assumed that some birds really didn't have feet. So hummingbirds included. Now we know that hummingbirds do indeed have tiny little feet that are just adorable, actually. They'll hang out when they're hot and kind of hide when they're cold, and but they cannot walk. So hummingbirds cannot walk with flat feet. They can only grasp and perch, and they do perch frequently. They will perch for periods between gathering nectar, and actually perches are very important to them. They have a different perch for every activity that they're doing, and that is how I locate them. I look for their perches, and then I know they're going to return to those perches time after time. So they are in the family Trochilidae, which means small bird. But within that family, the local hummingbirds you're going to see are specific. They have specific genuses and species, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about those. This little guy is another Costas male. I love the Costas hummingbirds because the Costas are some of the tiniest. They're about 3 inches long, and they're just adorable. This is a little male, and he's again got that handlebar gorget. And when they are dancing for a female, they will flash those out from side to side, and it's just adorable. I wish that I had a video of that to show you, but I don't, but you can look it up, and it really is worth looking at. So the genus and the species are what give them their unique characteristics that set them apart within their family of birds. The most common hummingbirds in this area of Southern California are going to be the Archilochus, the Calypte, and the Celisforus genuses. And within those genuses are going to be these hummingbirds that I've named. Usually the hummingbirds we're going to see are going to be about 3 to 4 inches long and maybe 0.1 to 0.2 ounces in weight. So they're tiny birds. The Archilochus colubris is the ruby-throated. I don't see those very often, but they are around. The Archilochus alexandri are the black-chinned. I also don't see them very often, but you can find them if you look. Mostly we're going to see the Calypte Anna, the Anna's hummingbird, the Calypte costi, the Costa's hummingbird, which is pictured here, the Celisforus calliope. The calliope hummingbird, I don't see much around here, but they are around. The Celisforus rufus, which is the rufus hummingbird, and the Celisforus sassin, which is the Allen's hummingbird. So just fun fact, Archilochus means chief in Greek. Calypte means veiled in ancient Greek as well. And this is because the species of hummingbird that's in the Calypte genus is the Annas and the Costas. And as you can see here, this little guy has a little bit of a head covering. Calypte means veiled. The Celisforus means light bringer. And I happen to love that because they are little light bringers. They are flashes of light. So these are the species that I have photographed in my area that I'm going to be showing you today are mainly the Annas, the Costas, the Rufus, and the Allens. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about their sounds, and I'm going to play you some sounds because if there are any birders out there, you know that a good part of birding is listening. So I'm going to play you a few sounds that you might recognize from your area. First of all, I'm going to play you the sound of an Allen's hummingbird display. And that is the little guy up in the top left corner. Hopefully you can hear that. So it's quite a sound for a little tiny 3.5-inch bird, but he's doing all he can to impress his lady friends. One of my very favorite sounds is the Rufus display sound. I'm going to play that for you here. Sounds like, to me, it sounds like a little motorcycle revving. And it is true that the Rufus hummingbird is known to be extremely fierce, a fierce protector of feeders. They have a very distinct personality that really goes well with their very big display sound. So I'm going to play you the sound of an Anna's hummingbird singing, because hummingbirds do sing, and especially Annas are known for their song. I'm going to play that for you right here. And you probably have heard this. So if you live in this part of the world, you've probably, if you're listening, you'll probably hear that sound a lot right now. They are everywhere, and they are singing like crazy to share information about their territory and also to share information with potential mates. But one of my favorites is also the display call of the Costa's hummingbird, because it is really just as cute as they are. So hopefully you can hear that. Sounds like a little whistle. That is the sound of a tiny little Costas, and they make the cutest little whistle. But I've got to say, my favorite sounds among hummingbirds are some of the sounds that Anna's males make when it's breeding season. So they call and perform these complex songs and calls and displays that are sometimes out of our hearing range, but they also make surprisingly loud displays. They're only 4 inches, but listen to the sound. And you may have heard it before. If you're a hummingbird lover, you probably have, but of an Anna's hummingbird, it's this whistle, pop. So that pop sound, it used to be thought that was made with their syrinx or vocal cords, but they actually make that with their tail feathers. So it's like a little mini sonic boom that you're hearing. It's pretty cool. Iridescence is a very important word to know in terms of hummingbirds. It is a great adaptation that they have for reproduction. A lot of birds with high dimorphism, which means that there is different coloring among males to females. And often birds will have very bright males and maybe dull females. This is very useful for a female to protect herself in camouflage during breeding season, and for males to attract mates. So in this case, they have this uniquely evolved feather structures that make their feathers highly iridescent. And so if you've seen hummingbirds, you've seen these flashes of bright light. They are more iridescent than any other bird species. Iridescence is common among birds. In fact, crows even have iridescence. Because birds can see in the UV range, they see each other quite differently because of this iridescence. But even we can see their iridescence. Melanosomes are pigment-containing organelles that make some of these bright and varied colors. And one of the things that is fascinating about hummingbirds, there's so many things that are fascinating, but one of the things that is really fascinating about them is that they actually know how to use their iridescence. So they say an actor can find their light, an actor can, find the spotlight. Hummingbirds can also find their spotlight, that being the sun. They know exactly how to use the sun to flash these brilliant colors for each other. And they do it. And they also know exactly how to hide themselves by bringing their feathers into the correct position, the flattest position, and getting out of the sunlight. And then they can hide themselves. So they've really developed these adaptations with their coloring. They are intense preeners. So this little guy is preening himself. He is an Allen's male, and he's preening himself because he needs these bright, flashy feathers, but he also needs, they all need to have their feathers well insulated because they're sensitive to heat and cold. They spend a lot of time preening in between mating and feeding and doing all the things that they need to do. They have an oil gland in their backs, and so they spread the oil out from this oil gland. And females get these pollen mites during breeding season especially, so they spend a lot of time preening these pollen mites that drive them crazy. As I said before, they are insectivorous, and so about 80% of their diet is made up of insects and arachnids. So they can also eat about maybe a few thousand mosquitoes per day. So, you know, we are very lucky to have them eating up all the mosquitoes, and they are fierce hunters of insects. So they're partly carnivorous, actually, and only 20% nectar gatherers. This doesn't mean that they don't need the nectar, but it just means they also need the protein. They live fast. They have extremely high metabolisms, heart rate up to 1,260 beats per minute, temperature around 105. They do spend life in the fast lane. They spend most of their time fighting, feeding, calling, singing, displaying, and mating. They burn so much energy that they need to consume about 1.5 to 3 times their body weight per day. This is equivalent to us consuming about 150,000 calories per day. Again, we talked about the torpor. Their temperature gets down to about 50 degrees and their heart rate down to 50, which is extreme, down from 500 during activity to about 50 beats per minute. They can also beat their wings up to 70 times per second, which we can barely fathom. When they go into torpor, sometimes they hang by their feet, which is kind of cute because they just sort of fall upside down and hang there. I've seen it before, it's adorable. So if you see a hummingbird in the early morning that's seemingly dead on a perch or on a feeder, they probably are just still in torpor, so give them a minute to warm up. It's a really good idea to just keep an eye on them, though, to keep them from being devoured by a predator. Hummingbirds are threatened. They need your help. That's why I'm here. That's why I spend my time talking about this. So since 1970, the population of the rufous has declined about 2/3. The Allens are listed as endangered and could lose half their population in the next 15 years. That is really scary to me. We could lose rufous and Allen's hummingbirds in our lifetimes. But all hummingbird species are threatened. Even though only 8% are endangered and only 8 species are critically endangered, they are all threatened. They live on the edge of survival, even when they have everything they need. They need constant sources of nourishment, as I said, equivalent to about 150,000 human calories per day. The pollinators compete for food, but habitat loss is the main cause of population decrease. They are non-cooperative breeders. In fact, they're pretty well solitary. They're pretty antisocial in some ways. Males basically try to mate with as many females as possible. The displays of gorgeousness are exactly for that. It's their job. And this is something they have to do because there is not a high success rate for survival within the first year. Females only have about 1 to 3 broods per year with a maximum of 2 eggs. So only 2 offspring per time. Protecting nests is vital. Their survival rate is very low. About 60% or more of babies die within the first few months. This right here is Phil. He lives in Montecito, nice life. And he absolutely loves salvia. And he has a very beautiful gorget. As you can see, he is an Anna's male. They have plentiful needs. So in order to survive and flourish, Hummingbirds need plenty of flowers, insects, clean water sources, safe spaces to perch and nest, refuge from harmful substances and surfaces. So I'm now going to share the top 10 ways that we can all help hummingbirds right now. And if we do these things, and if we don't do the things that we maybe should not be doing, I guarantee if we all get active in these ways, we can make a huge difference to their populations. I always say flowers over feeders. Plant lots of native flowers, salvias, other sages, butterfly bush, lantana, trumpet flowers, fuchsias, bee balms, succulents, all of those things. They love it. They also love some non-native flowers like Leonotis. They love the reds like hot lips. Flowers are always better than sugar water. But that said, I'm not a purist. In the dry spells, I say, please have feeders, but please properly maintain them. I always say, if you're not going to properly maintain a feeder, just plant plants, because feeders turn into poison when not properly maintained. And even I didn't know this until a few years ago. At temperatures over 70, I clean feeders every few days, but if it's over 85, I clean mine every day. I am militant about feeder cleaning. Prune carefully. Do not use power tools without checking for nests. When it's pruning season and everybody's out chainsawing trees and chopping them up, and I can hear this going on, I'm basically hearing a hummingbird apocalypse. So just know when you're hearing all of that going on with power tools, and you might be hearing part of the reason why hummingbirds are in decline. Please prune carefully. Look for the nests. The nests are about the size of a nickel. You cannot see them very easily with the naked eye. Please look for them, and then please leave them undisturbed. Also, if you're deadheading your plants, please try to have some other plants around to get them through. Because if you have done this before and you deadhead your flowers, you're going to have some really angry and upset hummingbirds on your hands. They always dive bomb me when I do that. Create safe nesting spaces. And the way to do this is by not over pruning. Let them have a little bit of foliage to hide in. Let them have places to nest. You can see here, I don't take photographs of female hummingbirds nesting very often because I like to leave them undisturbed. And it's very easy to disturb a female hummingbird and to frighten her away from her nest. And it's crucial that she's able to stay on the nest. If you look closely at a hummer nest, you can see that it's made of bits of spider web for adhesion and strength, layers of grasses and thistledown. The exterior is decorated with lichen for camouflage and protection. They are works of art. And it takes a lot to build them. So imagine if they get destroyed. It's all that much harder for them to start all over again. Do not use pesticides. And if you still use pesticides, I don't know what to say. According to the US Fish and Wildlife Service, 67 million birds die per year from pesticides. That's the facts. They're not good for us. The studies have shown they're definitely not good for birds. And they're really not good for hummingbirds and bees and other pollinators. I've used vinegar as a weed killer. Don't put it on plants because it'll kill every plant, but it does work as a weed killer. You can plant other plants like society garlic that's very stinky. Insects don't like it. But honestly, hummingbirds and other birds are naturally pesticidal. They will kill the pests. cat safety. I am a cat lover, so please try to hear this from a fellow cat lover. I am not dissing the cats. I love the kitties, and I've had many cats in my life. I love them, but they really are decimating bird populations, and they are one of the leading causes of bird death. It is not their fault. They are programmed to destroy. They love to catch birds, and that is what they're meant to do. So they are going to do it. So we domesticated them. It's our responsibility. Keeping them indoors, taking them for walks, or building catios. Catios are great for birds, and they're also great for cats. I just have to tell you, I have lost way too many cats to cars, and it's very awful and sad when you have to go and pick up their remains. So it's just better for everyone. Clean your feeders. Be as militant as I am with the feeder cleaning. Clean your feeders as if their lives depend on it. They do. I'm not going to get into all of this because I have little time, but if you want to look up how to maintain your feeders, the Audubon, every Audubon has a great little part on that. Use window decals. Bird strikes are the second largest threat to birds. Mind your neighbors. Always check your garage for struggling stuck hummingbirds. If you have windows open, please check that they haven't gotten in. Please learn how to properly escort them out. They are looking for light, so make your house as dark as possible. Open all windows and doors, and they'll probably go out by themselves. Do not try to be a rehabber. It takes a lot of training and to get a license as a rehabber. I don't have that. And you're not expected to know how to rehab a hummingbird unless you actually know how. If you find a struggling hummingbird, please contact, if you're in this area, then you can contact the Ventura Hummingbird Rescue. I am a big fan and supporter of theirs. I have the number here, write it down, and please call them and contact them through Instagram if you find a struggling hummingbird. Be an advocate. Talk to your landlords, your gardeners, your neighbors, your kids, and whoever will listen about how we can help hummingbirds with these few simple tips. And if you do that, you will make a huge difference. And maybe we can keep our future brighter. So thank you so much for allowing me to share with you. Very grateful. Looking forward to hearing your questions and some of your experiences with hummingbirds. Thanks very much.
Awesome. That was great. Thank you so much, Julie. And it's so great to have some clarity and understanding on the wonderful world of hummingbirds. Your passion for the subject is obvious and clear. And I also want to thank you for dedicating your time to help educate us about these small but mighty creatures. This time now, we'd love to hear from the audience. So I believe we've had a question or two, so I'm going to hand it over to Anne. And if you'd like to take on the questions and help Julie from there, it'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. Okay, so one question was whether Layla's bill was a natural deformity or a result of an injury. Do you have any idea?
Yeah. Yes, I believe that was not an injury. That was probably just a natural deformity. It might have been genetic. I don't know, but probably not an injury.
Okay, that's interesting. But you've never seen it in any other hummingbird. It was just unique to her.
I have seen it before. They can have injuries. And sometimes I've seen them with broken off bills, things like that. But this struck me as just her bill growing in an odd shape. And sometimes they can grow in a slightly odd shape if they've been if they've actually broken off. But this to me seemed more like it was something that happened from birth.
And We also have a question to talk a little bit more about gardening, about the gardening aspect. Maybe review some of the plants and mention when you mention hot lips, that's a particular cultivar of salvia, right? That's a sage, the red and white one that you see in gardens.
Exactly. That is a sage variety, and you can get it at your local nursery. And they really love it. Yeah.
They like sage in general, right? Almost any sage is a good choice for a garden, right?
Yes, every sage is a good sage for hummingbirds, but especially red and bright magenta. They're very drawn to those colors.
Certainly in the outdoors, I see them around the heartleaf penstemons and the fuchsia flowered gooseberries. Those seem to be real favorites of theirs in the wild. Those may or may not be realistic options for people in their gardens. But do they like regular fuchsias, the garden variety?
Oh yeah, they love fuchsias. I love fuchsias, but they're also, they're kind of they're better for gardens. They're very, for me at least, I find they're not that always that hardy.
Mm.
So they need a little more water. So if you're trying to do, a water resilient garden, they're not always the best choice, but I love them. So I'll have them in pots, and hummingbirds will instantly find those. They love them.
And I think a lot of the succulents too, because when they do bloom, they have the trumpet shaped flowers, right?
Yes, succulents will bloom in these sort of trumpet shapes. There's so many succulents you could plant. They love the agave. I mean, they'll go crazy for agaves. When agaves shoot their spike out, which unfortunately means they're at the end of their life, but they do this wonderful thing where they shoot out this very tall spike. And you've probably seen this if you live around Southern California. But then all the hummingbirds will just swarm around these flowers, and it's wonderful.
We also have a question about sunflowers, and I think that's an interesting question because that's not something I particularly associate with hummingbirds, but do you know if they like sunflowers?
I mean, they will find a way to gather from sunflowers, but that's not really, it's not a really attractant plant for them. If there's nothing else around, they'll probably snack on some pollen.
Yeah, I think sunflowers are a great favorite of bees, but not so much hummingbirds, right?
Yeah.
We have a question about, and this is an interesting question because I actually have seen another hummingbird aviary, but Thomas is asking, are there any other aviaries besides the one in San Diego where there are actually, hummingbirds living essentially in captivity?
I don't really know of any. And yeah, I mean, I think that kind of an aviary where it's actually a sanctuary is wonderful, but they don't generally tend to do well in captivity because they need a lot of range.
The
So
place that I had seen them was actually in, I think, Tucson in the desert garden, one of the desert gardens there. Totally different kind of hummingbirds, I think, from what we have here.
yeah,
But
there are a lot of costas there actually. They love it in the desert, and yeah.
And we have a question about whether, as let's see, you know, these hummingbirds that you talked about are all native to this. They evolved here, right? And so they would have co-evolved with plants that are better suited for them maybe than garden plants, although they seem to flourish with the garden plants as well, right?
Yeah, they do. I mean, hummingbirds originally evolved from their ancestors in the Andean jungles and mountain regions. Well, the mountain regions actually have a lot of jungle in them. But so they would have spread out from that area through Central America and then North America. And now their range is all the way up through Canada because of, climate change and all of that. But only some hummingbirds extend their range up through Canada. And you'll find that a lot of the Allens and the Costas will stay kind of in these areas that are warmer. They thrive in warm areas, and they've probably adapted to the native plants here. But hummingbirds are pretty good at adapting to what's around, and they'll literally drink from any nectar-bearing plant that they can.
Now, you had mentioned migration, particularly migration as a stressor, but talking about migration in general, I see hummingbirds all year round here. Do they migrate? Do our hummingbirds in this area migrate?
Some do. Some are semi-migratory, some are sedentary. And I've had hummingbirds that have lived in my garden for years, and then others that return year after year. Some Allens are semi-migratory. Annas have become, they are semi-migratory, but they've also become sedentary. They've just found such a great niche, and they're actually, there are more of them now. Unfortunately, now that the Rufous and Allen's populations are declining, the Annas are increasing, which, I love Annas, I love them all, but, they're finding ways of just staying and finding their territories. So yeah, it's hard to tell which ones are going to stay and which ones are migrating at this point, but a lot of the Annas do migrate all the way up through Canada.
Oh, so they would fly that far? That they
would. And then the other hummingbird that I talked about, I didn't really talk about them, but not the broad-billed, but not the black-chinned, but the ruby-throated, they obviously migrate a really long way across the country.
And do they migrate in a solitary pattern, or do they, I've never seen a flock of hummingbirds. They don't seem to flock, right?
They don't intentionally create a flock. Like a lot of other birds intentionally create flocks to migrate. They are solitary creatures. So if they're all migrating together, it's because they all are trying to get to their breeding grounds at the same time.
But they don't actually ever really go in a flock the way you would see with crows or the other communal birds, right?
They can be in what we might think of as a flock, but they haven't created a flock.
Mm.
They are just going the same way, but they are extremely solitary creatures.
Well, I've seen them, fighting over territory, and it looks like they would fight to the death. Do they?
Sometimes they do. Sometimes they do. I've unfortunately seen injuries that, because of fighting, that have led to death. They can stab with their bill, although they'd prefer not to, because they can actually get their bill stuck, and that means, death for the aggressor as well.
Well, it's like when elk get their horns locked together, everybody dies.
That's right.
Yeah. Let's see. We have somebody commenting that it would be nice for you to share this at schools. Do you do programs for schools? If we have any teachers watching who want to invite you?
Sure. I've just started this nonprofit, this media nonprofit, and I'm going to be doing a lot of instructional videos, a lot of sharing through this nonprofit. I used to share with school groups about marine life at the Malibu Lagoon when I was doing that. So I think it's really important to share with young people about, open spaces, wildlife corridors, why everything is connected, why that should matter to them. So I'd love to share with kids about hummingbirds. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Alec, who had commented on that, says that he or she, either, has 3 hummingbird nests at home right now, and they stream it live on the Hummingbird Spot on YouTube. So,
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm going to be checking that out.
yeah, definitely check out the Hummingbird Spot, because that sounds like fun. Yeah, it really is amazing to see the nest. You just have no idea that anything could be that tiny. I mean, the
Incredible.
eggs are just like fingernail size.
Yeah. Yeah, their eggs are about the size of a tiny jelly bean.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. Well, thank you so much for this presentation. And I think everybody enjoyed it. I really, really learned a lot myself. I think that was extremely helpful. Bill, do you have a few words?
I do actually have a question before we go.
Okay.
When we were speaking earlier before the event, we were talking about the importance of not using food coloring in the water. And on the maintenance, you went really quick through the feeder maintenance. And I just think for those that are left online, maybe if you could just really quickly explain, like, what is the best recipe to feed, to put in your hummingbird feeder, and why you shouldn't use food coloring. Because I was raised with food coloring.
Sure. I know I was raised with food coloring too. I ate it. Yeah. So this is the basic standard recipe for hummingbird feeder sugar water. It's 1 part sugar, 4 parts water. It's pretty easy to measure out. You can do it with a 1/4 cup or a cup. I make it with a cup of sugar and 4 cups of water. And you don't have to boil the sugar, but first of all, this type of sugar you use is really important. Some people think, oh, wouldn't it be great to use organic, unrefined sugar? No, it's great if we want to use it, but it's very hard on their system. They need refined, standard white sugar because it's been processed enough so that they don't have to process it in their system. It can cause them real kidney problems if we don't get this mixture right. So I just use that standard recipe. You can boil it if you want to kill off some spores, but if you have a really dissolvable sugar, like, don't use powdered sugar, that's not good for them, but you can get a more refined granulated sugar that will dissolve quickly. You don't necessarily have to boil that.
Right.
But then, when you clean the feeder, you don't have to use bleach. I use white vinegar, but I use it very thoroughly. You have to make sure and thoroughly clean it, because if you leave some of the mold in there, that's going to hurt them as well. So yeah, religious hummingbird feeder cleaning and maintaining is so important.
That's great. Thank you very much. And the presentation was spectacular. So first of all, thank you, Anne, for guiding us through the questions. That was spectacular. And many thanks to all of you online here for your participation and for the great questions. Of course, I think we can all say a round of applause and a heartfelt thank you for Dr. Julie Morley for leading our discussion tonight and sharing her many insights with us. Our event is now coming to an end. I know I have a lot to take away from tonight. I hope you all do as well. If nothing else, I hope this webinar gave you the opportunity to stop and think a little more carefully about our natural environment and how to best take care of our hummingbird population. To all the attendees tonight, I encourage you, get outside and go enjoy the Conejo open spaces. Spring is sprung. There's a lot of gorgeous life to see in our green hills this year while they're still green. Keep the wildflowers in the ground and don't stomp on the habitat, but definitely take as many photos as you would like and soak in the beauty. Enjoy our Conejo Valley, and please continue to be partners with us in the months and years to come. Thank you for your donations, your volunteerism, and your participation. I'll look for you out on the trails. So until then, have a good night. Thank you very much.
Thank you.